Hey, what's up everybody? Here's 5 things that you need to know before you decide to live rurally. Stay tuned. Hey, what's up everybody? My name's Labrie Borthesol. I'm a realtor at EXP Realty here in Kamloops, BC. Today I'm going to talk about what it's like to live rurally. And if you've decided that you want to buy a property, maybe it's an acreage, maybe it's just, half an acre, something like that, but it's totally bare land, this is your video and everything you need to think about. Number 1 thing to consider is, what is the size of the land that you're looking at? How much do you really need? What are your goals for the land? So that's a big topic and that's a lot to discuss, but it's important to consider. So if you're looking at 1 acre and all the neighbors around you, they've fenced off their land and you are just working with a total bare piece of land, what does that look like? What do you have in mind for using that land? And really the main criteria for considering this information is, what are you going to need to fence in? If it is bare land, or if it is a land with a house that you intend to tear down, what kind of fencing is already in place? Because honestly, fencing is a huge commitment. Well, if you're going to do it yourself, it's very time consuming and you have to have the proper equipment. If you're going to pay someone to do it, it could be very expensive, depending on the type of fencing that you choose. So really look closely at the property that you're looking at and determine what your fencing needs are going to be based on what your goals are for the land. And the other thing to consider is, if you're endeavoring to ranch or farm for the first time on a piece of land, and you've never done that before and you don't know what's involved or how much space you really need, you'll want to consider a couple of things. If you're going to have cattle or horses, how are they going to be fed? Are they going to graze off of the land that you have? Are you going to be able to put in a hayfield for them, which takes a lot of land? Or if they're going to graze on the land, also takes a lot of land per animal. So really important to consider how those animals are going to be fed if you're going to go the animal route. If you're really doing it to get a garden going or get crops going, also just maybe you wouldn't need as much space. So very important to consider how big the land is and what your goals are for it. Number 2 thing that you want to consider is, what buildings are already living on the land. Is there anything? If there's nothing, that's great. Then you can kind of start from scratch and design your own ideas. If you have a barn, that might be awesome too. What shape is the barn in? Is it still usable? Or is it just sort of one of those heritage cabins that kind of sits there? And does it need to stay? Can you tear it down? Those are important things to consider. And if there is a house on it, you'll definitely want to know a lot about the house, but really just considering the land, what buildings exist, and where's a good spot to build. So where's a good spot to build? Is there a level area on the land that you could consider construction? And then what's the soil content really like? Sometimes you are looking at land that's very hard to drill into, dig into, excavate, and sometimes it's easy peasy. So really doing your research in terms of what the ground is like. Thing number 3 that you need to consider. So utilities as a whole. And the biggest one on this one is going to be your water source. So is there currently a well on site? And if there is no well, then the real fun begins. So good thing to be aware of is that drilling a well, typically you can't even get the process started for less than $5,000. So with the sort of average range being about 10 to 20 grand for a drilled well. So it's a big, expensive undertaking and it's very variable. You want to maybe interview the neighbors and say, how's your well? How does it produce in terms of quality and quantity of water? And how deep did you have to drill before you hit water? And it's a case by case, piece of land by piece of land scenario. So take the neighbor's advice with a grain of salt, but it is a good idea to try to find out what the water table, underground water table, is really like in the area. And then you'll also want to have that water tested. If there is a well on site, you'll have to get the quality of the water tested by an environmental agency that provides that service. And then even beyond that, you'll need to know when you get your test results back, what filtration systems are an option for you for turning that water into totally safe for consumption, usable water. Furthermore, on the utilities front, what are your power options? Not every piece of land in the province of BC in the Kamloops area is serviced by Fortis. So Fortis is the gas provider. So you may be limited to other sources of power and heat besides gas. So that's going to drive up your hydro bills, but you won't have a gas bill. So really important to know that. And then when you're considering electricity and power, where are the power poles on the land? If you really find a beautiful spot that's, 500 feet from the nearest pole, you'll have to factor in how many poles it's going to take to bring the water to that ideal building site. Or maybe you want to put the building site close to the power to save money if the land's relatively flat and all has the same view. All things to consider. Yeah, and then when you're considering electricity and power, you'll want to consider where the nearest power pole is to your ideal building site on the land. And then factoring in how many poles that you'll have to add to bring the power to that ideal building site. Or another option is driving the electrical wires underground. Is that more ideal for you and your scenery and your view? In the cost comparison versus hanging the wires versus burying them. Item number 4 that you really want to keep in mind. What is your fire insurance going to cost? Because homeowners insurance is really just fire insurance. So is the property within a fire protection zone? And if it's not, that's not the end of the world. There's lots of land in the province that doesn't have fire protection per se, meaning if you call the fire department, they're not going to come. But that does drive up your insurance prices, because they're really thinking, okay, if this is a catastrophic fire, it's the house is likely to be a complete loss. And the province would come out if you were likely to start a forest fire or a grass fire. But really, you're on your own. If you're outside of a fire protection zone and you absolutely need insurance, and no matter what purchase you make, you need insurance for your home so that you can get it replaced and you didn't throw away hundreds of thousands of dollars on a home because you didn't have insurance. So when you think of your heat source, that does affect your rates. So a lot of people think, I want this cute little cabin in the woods with a wood burning stove and it's gonna be a log home, and they have these ideas in mind, and then they end up seeing what their prospective insurance quote is gonna be, and it could be a lot of money. So it's really important to, when you're thinking about your building materials, when you're thinking about your heat source, and you're thinking about your location, you want to think about the cost of insurance. So that's really a big thing. Number 4 is get a quote for insurance based on your ideas or your the home that you're really looking at. Okay, and number 5. So this is really several things wrapped into one. First and foremost, farm status. So does the land that you're currently looking at have farm status? And are you aware of the fact that farm status doesn't run with the land, it runs with the landowner? So if the current landowner has farm status and you want it too, you will have to reapply for farm status with BC assessment after you move in and qualify for it. The qualifications fluctuate based on the size of the land. So give your realtor a call or give BC assessment a call, and then you can find out exactly what's required from an income perspective for farm status. So that's how it works, is they calculate your farm status based on how much income you're able to pull in. And that really honestly might determine some of your goals with what you want to do with the land. More in the realm of a hobby farm, you might not qualify for farm status, and maybe you do, maybe you don't, but that also ties into other legislation that might be overriding on the land, which is agricultural land reserve. Super important, something that you need to be aware of when you're going to live rurally, when you're going to live on acreage, and even if your land isn't even that big, it could still be in the ALR. So what's the ALR? The ALR was put together in the 70s by the Agricultural Land Commission to protect land from overdevelopment in British Columbia. And what does that mean for property? It means that there are going to be very specific rules and bylaws that you need to follow that are going to affect your land, what you want to do with it, and the dreams that you might have for it. Does it have farm status currently? And is it in the ALR? Must know. Your realtor can find out very quickly, or you can visit the ALC's website as well. They have maps. Last thing on this item number 5 that I wanted to touch on was the zoning and regional district bylaws. So again, even in rural areas, you need to be aware of what the bylaws state for the zoning of your property, what's allowed and what's not. And this is something that can easily be grabbed typically off of a regional district's website. But you'll need your realtor to tell you what the zoning is, if it's not easy to find. All right, guys, that was 5 things that you need to know if you want to live rurally. And be sure to hit that subscribe button. Leave a comment below if I missed anything. Like this video. Give me a call if you have questions, and I'll help you find the perfect rural property for you.